Harold and Margaret Lawson, had spent most of their lives perfecting the art of being invisible. They lived in a modest, single-story home on a quiet street in suburban Ohio. The paint on the house had faded to a dull cream. The roof was older than most of the neighbors' kids, and the lawn, though always trimmer, had the manicured perfection of wealth. Harold drove a 12-year-old sedan with a dented bumper. Margaret clipped coupons, shopped at discount stores, and reused glass jars like they were priceless antiques. To the outside world, the Lawsons were struggling retirees. To their family, they were barely getting by. Social Security doesn't stretch like it used to. Margaret would sigh at family dinners. Harold would nod. We're just grateful we can pay the bills. No one ever questioned it. Why would they? Harold had retired early from a mid-level engineering job. Margaret had been a school librarian. No flashy careers. No inheritance stories. No sudden windfalls. What no one knew, what no one suspected, was that the Lawsons quietly controlled over $4 million in investments, cash reserves, and conservative portfolios spread across multiple institutions. They weren't hiding out of fear. They were hiding out of experience. 20 years earlier, Harold's father had died. The funeral hadn't even ended before the arguments began. Relatives Harold barely remembered suddenly appeared with stories, debts, and needs. Old grudges resurfaced. Smiles were sharp. Hugs felt transactional. By the time the estate was settled, the family was fractured beyond repair. Harold never forgot that. Years later, when his own investments began to quietly grow slow, boring, disciplined growth, he shared the truth with only one person, Margaret. They sat at the kitchen table, paperwork spread between them, hands shaking slightly. "We're comfortable," Harold said. Margaret stared at the numbers. Then she looked up. "We can never tell anyone." That was the moment the decision was made. Not because they didn't love their family, but because they knew them. Their son, Daniel Lawson, was 34. Daniel was smart, charismatic, and ambitious, just not consistent. He bounced between business ideas, freelance projects, and once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Each venture failed just short of success. Each failure came with a story. Harold and Margaret helped when they could. Small amounts, groceries, gas money, babysitting for Daniel's young daughter, Lily. They never said no outright, but they never rescued him either. Daniel often complained to his wife, Erica. "My parents could help more," he'd say. "They just don't want to." Erica agreed. "They're selfish. They act like they're broke, but they don't even try to improve things." The idea planted itself, and it grew. Margaret became an expert at appearing poor. She mastered subtle cues, buying generic brands, mentioning high medical costs, talking about budgeting constantly, wearing old coats even in public gatherings. Harold played his part perfectly. He refused upgrades, declined vacations, claimed confusion with technology, talked about fixed income as if it were a prison sentence. Friends admired their simplicity. Family pitied them. Both reactions were useful. The phone calls asking for money stopped coming. Instead, the tone changed. "Can you watch Lily again? Can you drive us to the airport? Can you store these boxes for a while?" Harold never complained. He was quietly learning something invaluable: who respected them, and who didn't. The secret didn't come out because of greed. It came out because of pride. Daniel had finally landed a lucrative contract consulting for a tech firm. For the first time in years, he felt successful. At a family barbecue, drinks flowed. Laughter filled the yard. Daniel had been talking to a cousin about investments. "I learned more from my parents than people realize," he said casually. Harold stiffened. "They're smarter than they let on," Daniel continued. "Honestly, if people knew how much they actually have saved." The words hung in the air. Silence fell like broken glass. Margaret felt her chest tighten. "What do you mean?" Erica asked sharply. Daniel laughed. I mean, come on. They're not as broke as they pretend. They've got serious money. Every head turned. And just like that, the mask slipped. The following week, the phone rang constantly. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Accusations came first. You lied to us. You made us feel guilty. You watched us struggle. Then came the demands. Loans, business ideas, medical emergencies, educational funds. Daniel was furious. How could you do this to me? He shouted over the phone. Do you know how stupid I look? Harold listened calmly. Margaret cried silently. But they did not give in. For the first time, Harold spoke plainly. Our money is not a family resource, he said. Gasps followed. You owe us, one cousin snapped. No, Margaret replied quietly. We owe honesty, not excess. They explained their reasoning. The lessons they learned. The boundaries they set. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Some walked away. Others stayed angry. A few, very few. Daniel stopped visiting. Erica blocked Margaret's number. Photos of Lily stopped arriving. It hurt. But Harold noticed something else. Peace. No more guilt. No more pretending. The money remained untouched. But something far more valuable had been revealed. Character. Months passed. Then a letter arrived. From Daniel. He apologized. Not for the secret, but for his entitlement. I thought wealth meant rescue, he wrote. Now I see it means choice. Margaret cried openly this time. Harold and Margaret never changed their lifestyle. They still drove the old car. Still clipped coupons. Still lived quietly. But now they did it openly. Not out of fear, but out of freedom. They had seen everyone's true colors. And that, more than money, made them rich. The first real confrontation happened on a Sunday afternoon. Harold and Margaret were sitting quietly when the doorbell rang sharp, impatient. Margaret already knew. When she opened the door, 3 relatives stood there uninvited. Harold's younger brother Frank, his wife Susan, and their adult son Kevin. Frank didn't bother with greetings. So, he said, stepping inside without permission. $4 million, huh? Margaret closed the door slowly. Who told you the amount? She asked. Kevin smirked. Doesn't matter. What matters is you let us struggle while you sat on a fortune. Harold stood up, calm, steady. You were never entitled to our savings, he said. Susan scoffed. Savings? This is generational wealth. Family money. Margaret shook her head. No. This is discipline money. Sacrifice money. The room filled with tension, thicker than air. Frank began listing memories. Remember when we asked for help with Kevin's college? Remember when Susan needed surgery? Each memory came with accusation. Harold listened carefully. Then he replied with facts. We helped when we could without destroying independence. Kevin slammed his fist on the table. You played poor. That's manipulation. Margaret's voice trembled but did not break. No, she said. It was protection. She explained the funeral. The inheritance war. The broken family. Frank went silent. But pride kept him angry. Within weeks, rumors spread. At church. At family gatherings. On social media. Posts appeared. Funny how some people pretend to be humble while hoarding wealth. Margaret stopped checking Facebook. Harold didn't. He watched. He learned. Who attacked publicly? Who asked privately? And who said nothing at all? Daniel was torn apart. At night, he replayed every conversation, every complaint, every assumption. Erica fueled the anger. They humiliated us, she said. They made us look stupid. But Daniel felt something else. Shame. Because deep down, he knew the truth. He had expected rescue. Lily asked one night, why don't we see Grandpa anymore? Daniel froze. No business failure had ever hurt like that question. He realized something frightening. Entitlement had a cost. And it was generational. Harold and Margaret began using their money differently. Not for relatives. For causes. Scholarships. Libraries. Quiet donations. They never posted. Never announced. Freedom meant choosing impact without applause. Daniel's letter was handwritten. Rare. Honest. I confused love with access. He wrote. I thought family meant obligation. I was wrong. Margaret read it twice. Then, a third time. Reconciliation was slow. No money exchanged hands. Only time. Boundaries were clear. Respect was non-negotiable. Daniel accepted them. Erica struggled but followed. At a small family dinner months later, Harold spoke softly. Money doesn't reveal character, he said. It removes the mask. No one argued. Harold and Margaret remained exactly who they were. Simple, quiet. They had learned the ultimate truth. True wealth isn't what you give. It's what you're no longer forced to give. News travels fast in small American towns. Whispers followed Harold and Margaret at the grocery store. Some smiles felt forced. Others disappeared completely. A neighbor finally asked, half joking, half serious, "So, were you secretly rich this whole time?" Harold smiled politely. "We were always the same people." That answer confused most, because people don't know how to measure wealth without numbers. Frank organized a family meeting without inviting Harold and Margaret. Voices rose. Plans formed. Someone suggested legal action. Another suggested public pressure. Kevin said quietly, "What if? They just didn't want us dependent." The room went silent. No one liked that idea, because it meant responsibility. Erica lay awake at night. Not angry, afraid. "If they don't help us," she asked Daniel, "what happens if we fail?" Daniel stared at the ceiling. "Then we learn," he said. The word surprised even him. Margaret found Harold's old notebook. Decades of handwritten notes, budgets, mistakes, lessons. One line stood out. Money should solve problems, not create people who expect solving. She closed the notebook gently. Susan called Margaret. Her voice was softer now. "Just a small loan," she said. "Emergency." Margaret paused. "I'm sorry," she replied. "We can help you find resources, but not money." The line went dead. Margaret's hands shook, but her voice hadn't. Daniel declined an easy shortcut at work. No favors. No shortcuts. For the first time, success felt earned. He understood then. His parents hadn't withheld money. They had protected growth. A library renovation appeared downtown. No donor name. A scholarship funded a first-generation student. Anonymous. Harold watched from a distance. Impact felt better than recognition ever had. Daniel invited his parents to dinner. No conditions. No requests. Just time. Margaret hesitated. Harold nodded. Healing always starts uncomfortable. Over dinner, Daniel spoke. "I blamed you for my fear," he said. "That wasn't fair." Harold replied gently. "We weren't hiding money from you. We were hiding a lesson inside time." Lily hugged Margaret tightly. "Grandma," she said, "you feel safe." Margaret smiled through tears. At that moment, every dollar felt insignificant. The confrontation didn't happen at home. It happened where pride hurts most. At a large family gathering. Frank stood up mid-conversation. "So tell everyone," he said loudly, pointing at Harold, "how long you pretended to be poor." The room froze. Margaret's heart pounded. Harold didn't raise his voice. "We never pretended," he said. "We lived simply." Laughter followed. Bitter laughter. Accusations came from every corner. "You manipulated us. You judged us. You enjoyed watching us ask." Margaret finally spoke. "No," she said. "We watched who asked with respect and who demanded." Silence replaced noise. Truth has weight. Everyone turned to Daniel. He felt the pressure. Old instincts told him to stay quiet, but he didn't. "They're right," Daniel said. Gasps filled the room. "They didn't fail us," he continued. "We failed ourselves." People left early. Friendships cracked. Some relationships ended forever. Harold felt relief, because forced closeness is heavier than distance. Later that night, Erica cried, not from anger, from release. "I was scared," she admitted. "I didn't want to struggle." Margaret held her hand. "Struggle teaches direction," she said softly. One last call came. "Kevin, if everything collapses," he asked, "will you help?" Harold answered calmly, "We'll guide. We won't fund dependency." Kevin hung up. That was the end. Weeks passed. The noise faded. Harold and Margaret woke up lighter. No secrets left. No roles to perform. Just choices. Daniel asked his father one evening, "What happens to the money someday?" Harold smiled. "What happens to you matters more." Daniel understood. The town remembered the controversy. But slowly, a new story replaced it. Not about money. About boundaries. About dignity. About quiet strength. Harold and Margaret sat on their porch at sunset. Same house. Same chairs. Same simple life. They had lost approval, but gained freedom. And freedom was the only wealth they ever wanted.